A rich young man spits in the face of an old waitress, believing no one would dare stop him. A quiet diner falls into silence, where dignity hangs by a thread. A German shepherd stands, blocking the door without a sound, and a stranger in the corner, who isn't just a man, but a former Navy SEAL. What happens next will change a life and expose a truth no one expected. Before we begin, please like and follow to support us. Thank you. A thin autumn wind moved through Red Hollow, carrying the scent of dry leaves and old stories that never quite left this town. Ryan Carter stepped out of his aging pickup with the quiet weight of a man who had seen too much and learned to carry it without complaint. At 35, he stood tall and powerfully built, broad shoulders stretching beneath a long-sleeved green tactical shirt with camouflage sleeves, matching military pants, and a black fabric belt cinched tight at his waist. His dark brown hair was cut short in a disciplined military style, a faint line of stubble shaping a sharp jaw that rarely softened. His eyes, steady, observant, did not wander. They measured. War had not hardened him into cruelty, but it had carved patience into his bones. Beside him, Max, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat and amber eyes, moved with silent precision, ears upright, every muscle calm, yet ready. Max did not bark, he assessed. Ryan had returned home only hours ago, the ink on his new appointment barely dry, sheriff of Red Hollow. Yet he wore no badge, no uniform. Not yet. Some instincts never left a soldier. Before you stepped into authority, you understood the ground beneath it. The Red Oak Diner sat on the corner, like a memory that refused to fade. Inside, Eleanor Brennan moved between tables with the quiet rhythm of someone who had done the same work for decades. 62, slightly hunched from years of standing, her silver-streaked brown hair tied loosely at the back, her pale skin marked by time and small hardships. Her hands trembled just enough to notice if you were looking, but her smile, warm, practiced, never did. Life had taken much from her, but it had not taken her dignity. Ryan chose a booth near the back, where shadows softened presence. Max lay beside him, head up, eyes scanning, as if the world itself might need guarding. The bell above the diner door rang. Prescott Whitmore III entered like he belonged to a different story altogether. 19, tall and lean, dressed in expensive casual clothing that seemed effortless, but spoke loudly of money. His blonde hair was styled with careless precision, his clean-shaven face smooth, untouched by consequence. His posture carried a subtle arrogance, the kind that came from never being told no and believing it. He did not greet anyone. He did not look up. He simply sat and waited. Eleanor approached with her usual softness. "Morning, honey. Coffee to start." Her voice was gentle, almost maternal. Prescott barely glanced at her. "Is it actually drinkable, or is it that burnt diner stuff?" His tone was flat, dismissive, not loud, but sharper than shouting. Ryan's fingers stilled around his cup. Max's ears shifted, just slightly. Eleanor did not react. "It's fresh. I made it not long ago." "Black," Prescott said, waving his hand as if brushing away an inconvenience. The diner continued breathing, but something in its rhythm faltered. Minutes passed. Prescott criticized the coffee, then the eggs, then the toast. Each word chipped away, not with rage, but with precision. Eleanor absorbed it all, as she always had. That was her survival. But inside her, something fragile tightened. Not anger. She had buried anger years ago, but a quiet exhaustion that asked how much longer dignity had to be defended in silence. Ryan watched, not as a man looking for trouble, but as a man who recognized it. He had seen this before, not in diners, but in different uniforms, different places, where power leaned on those who could not push back. Prescott stood abruptly. "This is unacceptable," he said louder now, drawing eyes. "Do you even know how to do your job?" Eleanor held the plate steady. "I'm sorry. I can fix it right away." Her voice did not break, but something behind it did. And then it happened. Not fast, not loud. Prescott leaned forward and spat. The moment stretched. The spit landed on Eleanor's cheek, sliding slowly, impossibly visible. Silence swallowed the diner whole. No forks moved. No chairs creaked. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Eleanor did not move at first. Her hand rose halfway, stopped, then continued, wiping it away with her apron. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. Not yet. She couldn't afford tears. Max stood, not aggressive, not barking, just standing, a line drawn in stillness. Ryan rose from his seat. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He walked forward with the quiet certainty of a man who had already decided. "You're going to apologize," Ryan said, his tone calm, even, but carrying something deeper, something that did not ask twice. Prescott turned, surprised, then amused. "Who the hell are you?" Ryan did not answer. Max stepped closer, positioning himself, not threatening, but undeniable. His amber eyes locked onto Prescott with unwavering focus. For the first time, something flickered across Prescott's face. Uncertainty. It was small, barely there, but it existed. "I said I'm sorry," Prescott muttered, dismissive. Ryan shook his head once. "No, not like that." The room tightened. Prescott glanced around, as if expecting someone to intervene, to restore the familiar balance where he stood above consequence. No one moved. Even Eleanor stood frozen, watching. Ryan's gaze did not leave Prescott. "You don't understand yet," he said quietly. "But you're about to." Max shifted, stepping subtly toward the entrance, blocking it. Prescott's eyes followed the movement, then back to Ryan. And in that moment, something changed. Not outside. Inside. A realization, slow, creeping, that the rules he had lived by might not apply here. Ryan took one step closer. His voice dropped, steady as stone. "You just picked the wrong place and the wrong man." The silence from that morning did not disappear. It followed Prescott Whitmore III like a shadow that refused to let go. He did not leave the diner right away. Not because he chose to stay, but because something quiet and unfamiliar, had locked his feet to the ground. The German Shepherd still stood between him and the door, not growling, not threatening, just present in a way that made escape feel incomplete. Ryan Carter didn't move closer again. He simply stood there, tall and grounded, his calm expression somehow heavier than anger. "You have two choices," he said, voice steady, as if explaining something simple. "You walk out, and this moment follows you everywhere. Or you stay, and you learn." Prescott scoffed, but the sound lacked conviction. "Learn what?" "How to serve burnt coffee to strangers." Ryan didn't react. "How to treat people." For a brief second, Prescott's eyes flickered, not with agreement, but with discomfort. He had spent 19 years perfecting the art of control, of speaking down, of never needing to reflect. Reflection was for people who had something to regret. "I don't owe her anything," Prescott said, though quieter now. Ryan's gaze shifted briefly to Eleanor, who had stepped back behind the counter, hands still trembling faintly as she wiped an already clean surface. "That's where you're wrong," Ryan replied. "You owe her more than you understand." Max lowered himself slowly to the floor again, but his eyes never left Prescott. It wasn't intimidation. It was expectation. And somehow, that felt worse. Prescott returned the next morning at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes later than he intended, and 30 minutes earlier than he had ever willingly been awake in his life. The sky was still dark. the kind of blue-black that made the world feel unfinished. The air carried a chill that slipped through his thin jacket, reminding him that comfort wasn't guaranteed here. He hesitated at the back door of Red Oak Diner before pushing it open. Inside, Dutch Morrison was already working. 67 years old, broad-shouldered though slightly stooped with age, his thick gray beard trimmed but rugged, his skin weathered from years of heat and hard work. A former Marine, Dutch carried himself with quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to be announced. He looked up once, eyes sharp, then went back to the griddle. "You're late," Dutch said, though his tone wasn't harsh. "It's not even 6, Prescott replied, defensive. Dutch shrugged. "Then you're early for the wrong life, and late for this one." Prescott didn't respond. He didn't know how. Eleanor arrived minutes later, her steps careful but steady, her coat wrapped tight around her thin frame. When she saw Prescott standing inside, there was a pause, small, almost invisible, but real. "Morning," she said, her voice neutral, professional. "Morning," Prescott replied. The word felt foreign in his mouth. There was no forgiveness in the air, but there was something else. A beginning. The first hour was quiet work. Eleanor handed Prescott a stack of napkins. "These go on every table, folded like this." Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, showing him each crease, each angle. Prescott watched, confused. "Why does it matter?" Eleanor didn't look up. "Because people notice when you care." It was such a simple answer that it irritated him, and unsettled him. He had never considered care as something visible. By 7 a.m., the diner opened. The first customer was Timothy Hodge, a retired postal worker in his early 70s, thin and slightly hunched, with silver hair combed neatly to the side, and kind, observant eyes that had seen years pass without complaint. He sat at the same stool every morning. Eleanor handed Prescott the coffee pot. "Go on." Prescott hesitated, then walked over. "Coffee?" Timothy looked up, studying him. "You're the boy from yesterday." Prescott swallowed. "Yes, sir." "You here because you want to be, or because someone made you?" The question landed heavier than expected. Prescott could have lied. Instead, he said, "Both." Timothy nodded once, accepting that answer. "Then pour steady. People can taste hesitation." Prescott poured. His hand trembled slightly. A few drops spilled onto the saucer. He noticed. For the first time in his life, he noticed. The morning rush came like a wave. Orders piled up, plates clattered, voices overlapped. Prescott moved too fast, then too slow, then not right at all. He mixed up orders, forgot details, spilled coffee twice, and dropped a plate of toast that shattered against the floor like a small, humiliating explosion. Each mistake burned. Not because someone yelled at him, but because no one did. They simply waited, watched, expected him to do better. That expectation felt heavier than anger. At noon, a woman entered who had never been there before. Her name was Sarah Whitman, early 40s, tall and slender, her ash-brown hair pulled into a low, neat bun, her pale skin almost porcelain in the soft daylight. She wore a tailored coat, simple but precise, and her posture carried discipline, the kind shaped by years in structured environments. Her eyes were sharp, analytical, the kind that missed nothing. She took a seat near the window. Prescott approached cautiously. "What can I get you?" Sarah studied him for a moment longer than necessary. "You're new." "Yes, ma'am." "You look like someone who's not used to being told what to do." Prescott almost smiled. Almost. "Maybe I needed it," he said. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "Then listen carefully. People will tell you who they are, but only if you pay attention." Her words lingered long after she ordered. Throughout the day, Ryan returned. but not as a customer. He stood outside for a moment, watching through the window. No uniform, no badge, just a man observing a process he had set into motion. Max sat beside him, calm, certain. Ryan didn't step inside. He didn't need to. By late afternoon, Prescott's feet ached, his back burned, and his hand smelled permanently of coffee and soap. He leaned against the counter for a moment, exhausted. Eleanor appeared beside him. "You did better today." "I did everything wrong." She shook her head gently. "No, you showed up." Prescott looked at her, really looked this time, at the fine lines on her face, the quiet strength in her posture, the resilience that had carried her through years he couldn't imagine. "I didn't see you yesterday," he said quietly. "I know," Eleanor replied. There was no accusation in her voice. And somehow, that made it worse. As the sun dipped low and the diner quieted, Prescott wiped down the last table. Outside, the evening stretched calm and golden. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for his phone. He just stood there, thinking, feeling. And somewhere deep inside, something unfamiliar began to take shape. Not guilt, not yet, but awareness, the kind that doesn't ask permission. The morning came colder than the day before, the kind of cold that settled into the bones and reminded a man that comfort was never permanent, only borrowed. Prescott Whitmore III arrived earlier this time, 5:31 a.m., not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because sleep had refused him. The quiet had been too loud in his room, filled with thoughts he did not yet know how to carry. He pushed open the back door of the diner with less hesitation now, though not without a trace of unease that still followed him like a second shadow. Inside, Eleanor was already there, her small figure moving methodically between tables, setting the morning in order before it began. Her movements were slower today, the stiffness in her joints more visible, but her posture remained upright in a quiet defiance against time itself. Prescott noticed it now, the way she favored her left leg, the slight pause before bending, the way she never asked for help. He had not noticed any of it before. Max lay near the counter, his black and tan coat catching the dim light, his amber eyes lifting the moment Prescott entered. The dog did not move, but his gaze followed him, not as a warning this time, but as a silent assessment. Prescott felt it again, that strange sensation of being seen without being judged. "Morning," Prescott said, his voice quieter, more grounded. Eleanor glanced at him, surprised just enough to show it. "Morning." No more was said. But something had shifted. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the diner returned. Plates, coffee, quiet conversations. Prescott moved with more awareness now, not faster, but more deliberate. He made fewer mistakes, though each small success felt heavier than it should, as if he were rebuilding something fragile he didn't yet understand. At 10:12 a.m., the bell rang. The man who entered did not belong to the usual flow of customers. He walked with a careful stiffness, each step measured, as though his body remembered pain long after it should have faded. His name was Gideon Fletcher, mid-60s, tall but slightly stooped, his gray hair cut short, his face lined deeply, not just by age, but by something heavier, loss that had settled and refused to leave. He wore a faded veteran's cap, its edges worn from years of being held, adjusted, remembered. Eleanor saw him first. A flicker crossed her face, recognition, then something softer. "Morning, Gideon." He nodded once. "Morning, Ellie." Then his eyes shifted, to Prescott. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. It wasn't anger that surfaced, it was something quieter, something colder. "I'll take table 7, Gideon said, his voice steady, almost too steady. Eleanor hesitated, just for a moment. I want him," Gideon said, nodding toward Prescott. The room didn't change, but Prescott felt it, like stepping onto ground that might not hold. Prescott approached with the coffee pot in hand, the familiar routine suddenly unfamiliar again. "Coffee, sir?" Gideon didn't answer right away. He studied Prescott's face with the kind of focus that stripped away pretense. "You remember me?" Prescott swallowed. "No, sir." "Gideon Fletcher," the man said. "You knew my son." The words landed like something physical. Prescott's grip tightened on the coffee pot. His mind searched, resisted, then found it. Clayton Fletcher, a boy from school. Quiet, awkward, always trying just a little too hard to belong. Prescott had not thought about him in over a year, until now. "Yes," Prescott said, barely audible. Gideon nodded once. "Good." He didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. "I'll have coffee, black, and pancakes." Prescott poured the coffee, his hand steadier than he expected, though his chest felt tight, as if something inside had begun to press outward. He brought the food when it was ready, set it down carefully. Gideon didn't look at it. "You remember what you did to him?" Gideon asked. Prescott opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I'm not asking for an apology," Gideon continued. "Apologies are for people who can fix things." His voice remained calm, but beneath it was something that did not need volume to be heard. "My son believed people could be better than they are," Gideon said, "even when they proved him wrong." Prescott's throat tightened. "He's gone now," Gideon added. "And I don't know if what you did was the reason. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just one piece of something bigger." He finally looked at Prescott directly, but it didn't help. The words did not accuse. They concluded. Prescott stepped back, the space between them suddenly too small, too full. In the kitchen, Dutch watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Eleanor stood still behind the counter, her hands resting on its edge, as if holding something steady that could easily fall apart. Prescott turned away. For the first time in his life, he did not defend himself. He did not explain. He did not justify. He simply walked into the back hallway and stopped, his hand braced against the wall. His breathing was uneven now, not from exhaustion, from something else. Max appeared beside him, silent as always. The dog didn't approach too close. He simply sat, watching, as if understanding that this was not a moment to interrupt, but one that needed to be endured. Prescott laughed once, a short, broken sound. "You don't judge, do you?" Max didn't move, but his eyes didn't look away. Later that afternoon, as the diner quieted, Prescott returned to the floor. He didn't avoid Gideon. He didn't rush past him either. He simply continued working. But everything had changed. Every plate he carried felt heavier. Every word he spoke felt measured. Every glance from a customer carried weight he could no longer ignore. Because now he understood something he hadn't before. People remembered, not just what you said, but how you made them feel. Outside, across the street, a black SUV sat parked longer than necessary. Its windows were tinted, its engine idling low. Ryan Carter stood at a distance, arms folded, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. He had noticed it the moment it arrived, not because it was obvious, but because it didn't belong. Max noticed too, even from inside. The dog's ears shifted once, subtle, precise. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. War had taught him many things. One of them was this: danger rarely announced itself. It waited, watched, and chose its moment carefully. Ryan glanced once more at the diner, at Prescott, at Eleanor, then back to the SUV. Something was coming, and it wasn't finished yet. The sky hung low over Red Hollow that morning, heavy with gray clouds that seemed to press down on the town, as if even the weather sensed what was about to surface. Prescott Whitmore III, did not sleep at all that night. The words of Gideon Fletcher had not faded. They had settled, deep and immovable, like something finally finding its place after years of being ignored. When he entered the diner before dawn, his steps were quieter than ever, not out of caution, but out of something closer to humility. It was not complete yet, not stable, but it was there. Eleanor noticed first. She always did. Her eyes, though tired and lined with years of quiet endurance, had learned to recognize change long before it was spoken. "You're early," she said gently. Prescott nodded. "Couldn't sleep." She didn't ask why. Some truths needed time before they could be said aloud. Max lay near the entrance, his body relaxed, but his gaze alert. When Prescott stepped inside, the dog's eyes followed him briefly, then softened, as if acknowledging something unspoken. Prescott paused for a moment, looking at the animal. "You knew, didn't you?" he murmured under his breath. "Before I did." Max blinked slowly. Across the street, the black SUV was gone, but its absence did not bring comfort. Ryan Carter stood outside the diner, leaning lightly against his truck, his posture casual to anyone passing by. But nothing about him was casual. His eyes scanned the street, the rooftops, the reflections in the windows. War had taught him to read absence as clearly as presence. And something about that SUV, about the way it had lingered, did not belong to coincidence. He stepped inside the diner quietly. This time he did not sit. Eleanor looked up, surprised. "You're back early." Ryan nodded once. "Morning." His voice carried the same calm, but there was a slight edge now, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Prescott saw him and straightened instinctively. There was no arrogance left in that movement, only awareness. Ryan's gaze held him for a moment longer than usual, not judging, measuring. Then Ryan turned to Eleanor. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, then nodded, stepping with him toward the back. Prescott watched them go, and for reasons he could not explain, he felt like something important was happening just out of reach. In the back office, Ryan closed the door gently. "You know Prescott's father?" he asked. Eleanor's expression shifted, not fear, but something heavier. Recognition. "Everyone does," she said quietly. "Victor Whitmore, senator, owns half this county, if you believe what people say." Ryan nodded slightly. "I don't believe what people say. I believe what they hide." Eleanor's hands tightened slightly in front of her. "Why are you asking?" Ryan studied her carefully. "Because someone's watching this place, and people don't watch diners like this unless there's something worth protecting or silencing." The words hung in the air. Eleanor looked away. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, quietly, "My husband worked construction, years ago, on a government project. Veterans housing. It was supposed to help men who came back, broken." Her voice faltered just slightly. The funding disappeared. Corners were cut. Buildings failed inspection. Ryan didn't interrupt. "He died on that site," Eleanor continued. "Officially, it was an accident." Ryan's eyes didn't move. "And unofficially?" Eleanor swallowed. "Unofficially, it was negligence, and no one was held accountable." Ryan leaned back slightly, processing. Victor Whitmore was involved. It wasn't a question. Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't need to. Out front, Prescott wipes down a table that was already clean. His movements were slower today, more deliberate, as if each action carried weight beyond the surface. He glanced toward the back office again, tension building quietly in his chest. The door opened. 2 men entered. They didn't belong. The first was tall, broad, with a clean-cut appearance that looked too deliberate. Dark suit, short black hair, no facial hair, his face sharp but empty, like a man trained to show nothing. The second was slightly shorter, heavier, with a thick neck and rough hands that didn't match the suit he wore. His eyes moved constantly, scanning, calculating. Prescott froze. Max stood, not fast, not aggressive, just aware. The first man approached the counter. "We're looking for someone." Dutch stepped forward from the kitchen, wiping his hands. "You found a diner," he said calmly. "You planning to eat, or just stand there?" The man smiled faintly. "We're not here for food." His gaze shifted to Prescott. Something cold passed through the room. Prescott's heartbeat picked up, fast and uneven. He didn't know why, but he knew this wasn't random. Ryan stepped out from the back at that exact moment. The timing wasn't coincidence. It never was. His presence filled the space without raising his voice. "Problem?" Ryan asked. The suited man turned to him, studying. "And you are?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, placing himself subtly between Prescott and the two men. Max moved beside him, aligned. The second man scoffed lightly. "We're just here to remind the boy of where he belongs." Prescott felt the words hit him harder than anything Gideon had said, because this was the life he came from. Ryan's expression didn't change. "He's working." The first man tilted his head slightly. "Not anymore." The room tightened. Eleanor stood still behind the counter, her hands gripping the edge. Dutch didn't move, but his stance shifted, ready, and Prescott, for the first time, did not step back. "I'm staying," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't shake. The suited man's smile faded. Ryan's eyes flickered, just once. Not surprise, recognition. Something had changed, something real. Later that day, the diner was quieter than usual. The men had left, but not without leaving something behind, a message that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Ryan stood outside again, the wind brushing lightly against his jacket. He held a folder now, thin but heavy with meaning. Inside were documents he had begun to gather, contracts, financial records, small pieces of something much larger. Max sat beside him, still, waiting. Prescott stepped out onto the porch, slowly, his face pale but resolved. "They work for my father," he said. Ryan didn't look at him. "I know." Prescott hesitated. "He's not going to stop." Ryan finally turned, his eyes steady. "No, he's not." A long silence passed between them. Then Prescott spoke again. "What do we do?" Ryan's answer was simple. "We tell the truth." The rain came softly over Red Hollow, not as a storm, but as a quiet cleansing, washing the dust from streets that had carried too many unspoken things for too long. Prescott Whitmore III stood alone outside the courthouse, his reflection faint in the glass doors before him. He looked different now, not in the way money could change a man, but in the way truth did. His posture was still straight, his features still sharp, but something had softened behind his eyes. Not weakness, understanding. Inside, the room was already filling. Ryan Carter entered without ceremony, his green tactical jacket slightly darkened by rain, his presence steady and grounded. For the first time since returning to Red Hollow, he wore the badge, Sheriff. It sat on his chest without pride, without display, as if it had always belonged there. His short dark hair was damp, his jaw set but calm. Beside him, Max walked in silence, his black and tan coat brushed clean, amber eyes alert but composed. The dog did not look around nervously. He simply took in the room, as if marking it as safe. For now. At the front, Victor Whitmore sat at the defense table. He was a man in his late 50s, tall, broad-shouldered, his silver hair combed neatly back, his face clean-shaven and sharply defined. His suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection, the kind of detail that spoke of control. But his eyes, cold, calculating, betrayed something deeper. A lifetime of winning had taught him one thing: power was not to be questioned. Until now. Beside him sat his attorney, Leonard Graves, a thin man in his early 60s with narrow features and pale skin stretched tightly across sharp cheekbones. His dark hair, streaked with gray, was slicked back with precision. His voice, when he spoke, was smooth, almost soothing, but there was a sharpness beneath it, a habit of bending truth without ever appearing to break it. Leonard had built his career defending men like Victor, men who believed consequence was something that happened to others. But the room felt different today, because Prescott was there. When Prescott stepped forward, the quiet shifted. He wore no suit, no tie, just a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled slightly at the forearms, as if he had come straight from work, because he had. His hands were steady now, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he had already faced something worse than fear, himself. Victor's eyes lifted when he saw his son approach. For a brief second, something almost human flickered there. Then it was gone. "You don't have to do this," Victor said quietly, his voice controlled, measured. "You don't understand what you're stepping into." Prescott stopped a few feet away. He studied his father, not with hatred, not with defiance, but with something far more unsettling. Clarity. "I understand more than you think," Prescott replied. Leonard Graves leaned forward slightly, his voice smooth. "Prescott, you're young. Mistakes happen. This doesn't need to become permanent." Prescott almost smiled, not out of humor, out of recognition. "I used to think like that," he said, "that everything could be fixed, or hidden." He glanced briefly toward Eleanor, seated quietly in the back row. Her posture was small, almost fragile, but her eyes were steady. Dutch sat beside her, arms crossed, his presence solid as ever. Gideon Fletcher stood near the wall, silent, watching. Max lay at Ryan's feet, calm, unshaken. Prescott looked back at his father. "But some things aren't meant to be hidden," he continued. "They're meant to be faced." The testimony began simply. No dramatics, no raised voices, just facts, documents, records. Ryan stepped forward first, placing the file onto the table. "Financial transfers from the Veteran Housing Project," he said. "Funds redirected, safety inspections bypassed, multiple violations documented and ignored." Leonard moved quickly. "Allegations," he corrected smoothly. Ryan met his gaze without flinching. "Evidence." The difference hung in the air. Then Prescott stepped forward. The room seemed to hold its breath. "I grew up believing my father was a good man," Prescott began, "because he told me he was, because everyone else did too." He paused. "I didn't question it. I didn't question anything." His voice didn't break, but it deepened. "I hurt people," he continued, "because I thought I could, because I thought it didn't matter." Gideon lowered his gaze slightly. Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. Prescott inhaled slowly. "And I was wrong." That word, wrong, echoed quietly, more powerful than any accusation. "I saw what happens when you stop seeing people," Prescott said, "when you treat them like they don't matter." He looks directly at his father now. "And I learned that from you." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, of truth that could no longer be denied. Victor Whitmore's expression remained composed, but his hands, just slightly, tightened against the table. "You think this is justice?" Victor asked, his voice still controlled, but colder now. "Destroying everything your family built?" Prescott didn't hesitate. "It wasn't built," he said quietly. "It was taken." Hours later, the decision came, formal, final. Victor Whitmore was taken into custody, not dramatically, Not violently, but undeniably. As he was led past Prescott, he paused just once. "This world will teach you what you've just done," Victor said under his breath. Prescott met his gaze. "It already has." Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt different, lighter. Eleanor stood near the steps, her coat pulled close, her expression unreadable at first. Then she looked at Prescott, and for the first time since that morning in the diner. She nodded. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close, something real. Days later, the Red Oak Diner was full again. The sound of dishes, quiet laughter, the hum of ordinary life returning to its place. Prescott moved between tables, steady, focused, present, no longer pretending, no longer above, just part of it. Ryan sat near the window, his sheriff's badge catching the soft afternoon light. Max lay beside him, head resting calmly on his paws. Outside, the town moved forward. Inside, something had been restored. Not perfectly, but honestly. And sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or blazing light. Sometimes, they come quietly, through a moment when someone chooses to do what is right, even when it costs everything. Maybe that's how God works. Not by changing the world all at once, but by changing a single heart and letting that change ripple outward. Prescott thought power defined a man, but in the end, it was truth, humility, and courage that saved him. And maybe in our own lives, the miracle isn't what we receive, but the moment we finally see clearly and choose differently. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in goodness. Leave a comment about where you're watching from and subscribe to keep these stories alive. May God watch over you, guide your steps, and bring quiet miracles into your life when you need them most.